Alright guys, in this video, I'm going to address probably the oldest argument in the car modifying world, the coilovers versus lowering springs. Which are better and which should you get? So in this video, I'm going to give you the pros and cons of both and help you make the decision between going lowering springs and coilovers. So, firstly, I'm actually going to start with lowering springs and give you the pros and then cons of the lowering springs first, and then we'll go into coilovers there. So, basically with lowering springs, the big benefit to them is that they're considered to be cheap and easy. So technically they're no easier to install than coilovers, but they're considered easy because you just get springs, you chuck them on your current dampers, and now your car's lowered. However, there are cons that come with that, and I'm going to go into that in a minute. But their biggest point is that basically they're the lowest cost way of lowering your car, not including cutting your current springs, etc. I'm talking about actually buying parts to do it properly. Lowering springs are the best way to do that. So basically the biggest benefit is the fact that they're cheap. That's that. Now, the second thing is that they're usually, or people claim, and I'm going to address this, but people claim that they're better for comfort, which is partially true because they're designed to work with factory dampers, and so those dampers can only handle relatively soft springs, typically speaking, and as a result, they tend to be a little bit more comfortable than, let's say, performance-oriented coilovers that are designed for track use. But I'm going to go into why that's not exactly true in the con section shortly. Now, another benefit is that they're designed to work with factory dampers. Now, that's not necessarily a positive unless you just want to lower the car and you're going to use it on the street. But what it is good for is that they work with the factory suspension. So that kind of fits in here. For more modern cars, that's an important factor because a lot of modern cars have different sensors, different leveling systems, etc. on the factory suspension. And so you can't really keep those and install coilovers. You're basically going to eliminate them. Or in some cases, it might even be very difficult to install coilovers at all without heavy modifications. So the benefit is that they'll work with the factory system, typically speaking. You'll just put the lowering springs in, and then the car will be slightly lower, but you've still got all the factory suspension benefits. So that's basically that. Those are basically the only benefits of lowering springs. It's the fact that they're cheap and the fact that they work with factory dampers, and the coilover, the comfort part is not really even true, and I'm going to address why that is here. So cons. So the cons of lowering springs. Basically, the biggest con of these compared to coilovers is no adjustability. You cannot adjust anything. And I'm going to ignore the fact that you could chop a coil off with an angle grinder, etc. We won't go into that argument here. I've done it, we've probably all done it, but it's not the best way to do things. So basically, as they're designed, there's no adjustability in lowering springs. So that's one big con, because when you install them, you're just stuck with whatever height you get. And anyone who's had lowering springs and tried to lower their car will know the feeling of when you drop the jack for the first time, the car lowers and it's nowhere near as low as you wanted, and it never settles to the height you wanted, and you get that sunken heart feeling of disappointment because they're not as low as you wanted and you just spent $400 or $500. That's the problem with lowering springs. That's probably the biggest downside. Now, the second one is that I was going to say there's usually not perfect height, and that's kind of what I just said. So not the perfect height almost ever. I have never had lowering springs that I've bought, and I've had quite a few sets that I've had over the years. They were never the height that I wanted. They were never quite low enough, never quite what I wanted. I was never 100% satisfied. So that's the problem you're going to have with those. You will pretty much never be satisfied with them. Trust me on that one. Now, the next one is that they typically make the damper operate out of the range that it's designed to. So for that one, I'm just going to put damper range. The reason why is because a factory damper, and I'm just going to draw you a quick diagram. A factory damper works like this. Let's say that's the damper tube, and you've got the piston. And the piston is supposed to sit, let's say, at a nominal height here. And when it rebounds, it might go up a bit till there and dampen all the way down to there. So it's got like that range to work with, right? The problem you have is when you use lowering springs, I'm going to use a red for this so you can see the difference. You drop the nominal part where it sits. Let's say you drop it a bit. Let's say the damper now sits here. So now you still have the rebound range up here, but you've basically lost 2/3 of your compression range. Now, those numbers are not necessarily accurate. I'm just illustrating for the making a point here. And so the problem you have is you have just lost a good chunk of your suspension travel from the compression. You see, this section of compression is now gone, and you've only got that little bit here. If it goes below that, you risk bottoming out on the bottom of the damper, and then that's basically a quick way to kill your dampers and blow the seals and cause all kinds of problems and make for a very uncomfortable ride. And so that's a big problem with lowering springs, especially if you go more than, let's say, an inch lower. Then you're going to have this issue. You're going to blow your dampers quickly, and then all of a sudden it's no longer cheap, because now you need to replace your dampers, and now you're going to end up spending as much, if not more money than coilovers, because now you have to do the install twice, plus you had to pay for new dampers anyway. So you thought you were saving money, but you actually weren't. So they're not actually that cheap. So I'm kind of going to cross that one out, because you see the problem here. So that's the issue with the dampers. Now, most people put them on old dampers. So they think it's cheap because they take new lowering springs, they chuck them on old dampers, which usually have 50,000, 100,000 kilometers more sometimes. And they think it's cheap, and then you have this issue where the damper was probably already fucked and out of its life to begin with, and now you're bottoming it out, and it's not going to last very long. So that's the major problem with lowering springs. Now, let me just clean that. Let's get rid of the drawing, because there's more cons coming. So, they're not good for track use. So not for track. And the reason why is because factory dampers basically can't handle track use. They're not designed for that. They're usually twin tube. They're usually designed for the street. They're not designed for, such, let's say, the heat and the extreme conditions that a track racing would do. And so therefore you're basically going to blow the dampers pretty quick, and they're just not going to perform well if you're running them lower than they were designed for and in an environment that they were designed for. And so basically they're not really good for track use. Now, I'm ignoring the fact that you could buy a setup, which is a damper and spring setup known as a cup kit, which are matched, and some of them are made for performance. I'm going to address that when we get to the coilovers in the cost section, because I don't think that's going to cost you any cheaper. In fact, sometimes it's more expensive than a decent set of coilovers. We'll go into that in a minute. Now, the next thing is that the dampers and the springs will not be matched well. So spring rates not matched. Not matched. So basically, what you need to be aware of in regards to springs and dampers is that the dampers are valved to match the spring rate so that the damper can control the spring. That's basically its job. The spring kind of takes the load, and the damper is supposed to control the spring so it doesn't just do this and reverberate and just bounce forever. The problem you have is if you install stiffer springs on a damper that can't handle it, that damper is going to blow because it cannot keep up with that spring, and therefore it's going to ride like crap, and it's going to blow quicker. And so that's the problem with the lowering springs. Usually lowering springs and factory springs are progressive rate springs, but they're going to have to be a bit stiffer so that you don't bottom out as much because you're lower, but now the damper can't handle that. Unless, again, you bought matched dampers, and then we're basically talking a full suspension setup. So like I said, we'll go into that later. But that's the problem. So if you think you're going to get lowering springs and chuck them on your factory dampers, you're going to have all of these problems. So that's the issue. It's a very short-lived solution. And then the last point I was going to make is that they basically cost the same as coilovers if you get a matching set. So a full set costs as much as coilovers. So basically what happens is if you get a cup kit, so a matching spring and damper combo, now you're going to have new dampers that match the spring rates, etc. But the problem is this: for a decent cup kit, you're basically going to pay anywhere from $800 to $2,000 plus, except that you're not going to get any adjustability at all. So you're going to get new dampers, which is good, and they're going to be matched, but you're still not going to get any adjustability. So if you ever decide that you don't like the height of the springs, which is very, very likely the first time you put them in, let alone later down the road if you change your wheel, tire setup, whatever, or if you're planning to track them, you're going to end up with pretty much the same cost as a decent coilover kit, except none of the adjustability. And so that was a complete waste of time and money, because you just got less for the same amount of money. That's my personal opinion on it. So I don't think it's worth the money, and it doesn't actually end up being cheaper either. Now let's go into the coilovers, and I'll give you the pros and cons of the coilovers. So with the coilovers, the first pro is that you have a ton of options. There are tons of coilovers on the market for any popular car that's worth modifying, and even cars like all kinds of random cars you wouldn't think of. Some companies, like especially BC Racing, basically have a model for like every car. And so you can get coilovers for tons of cars, especially the ones that are popular for track and anything that's remotely popular for modifying. So you get a ton of different options. You get track coilovers, you get street comfort coilovers. You basically get anything you want in a coilover setup. Now, the next benefit is adjustability, and that's the whole point of coilovers in the first place. Basically, coilovers were made for the adjustment for race use. That's how they started, so that they could swap the springs and then adjust the dampers and quickly do that so that they could get faster lap times. That was basically what they were made for. And coilovers allow you to do this on the road as well. So typically speaking, you probably won't be swapping the springs out a lot, but you'll be adjusting the dampers harder and softer, especially if you've got some that obviously have adjustable dampening, so that you can make the ride, let's say, softer for the street. And you go to the track, you can stiffen them up. Now it's a bit stiffer. You can do the performance driving, and then you can drive home in comfort. And so that is the benefit of the coilovers, as well as the height adjustment, because you're going to be able to do height and dampening if you get dampening ones. So I'm going to put this so that you know it's both. And that's the benefit. You can adjust the height, which is why most people buy coilovers, so that they can actually adjust the height, and you get the dampening adjustment on most kits that are available today. And so that in itself is the big plus, so that you can really fine tune where the car sits and how it rides. Now, the next point is that there are kits for all types of needs. That was kind of the point in the first one. I'm just going to put here road and track. Basically, you can get coilovers that are made more for road and more for track, so that if you want a softer kit, you can go for road kit. If you want a full track spec racing kit, you can get that too with coilovers. That's something that you're just not going to be able to do with lowering springs. There is just no performance benefit of lowering springs over coilovers, basically. Now, the next point is that they're great for performance. So performance. Now, while not every single coilover kit was designed for performance, some are designed to just lower your car, and some are more for comfort. Typically speaking, coilovers as a part were designed for performance. So if you're looking to improve your handling performance and you get a decent quality coilover kit that's been actually designed well for your car, you're going to get a good handling performance boost. So that's the whole point of them in the first place. That's why they were made. Now, the next one is that they come with matching dampers. So that's the problem you're going to have with lowering springs if you put them on the factory shocks, which is what most people plan to do. Coilovers give you new, and I'm going to put new as well here, because they're new dampers. I'm assuming you're buying both of these kits new as well. I'm not talking about secondhand here, but new, you get new dampers that are matched to the spring rate. And if you get any coilover kit that's decent, that offers customization, let's say BC Racing, Fortune Auto, all these ones, if you do different spring rates, they also revalve the dampers, or they give you dampers with valving to match the spring rates as well. So if you want to go for stiffer springs, you can get the matched dampers as well. And that's one of the big problems you have in lowering springs. You just don't get that unless you buy a full kit, at which point you may as well get coilovers. Now, the next thing is that they go lower than springs, so lower. So I'm just going to put lower here. So with springs, the problem you have is you are very limited to the range that you have with the factory damper, and you can only really go as low as the factory damper is going to allow you to go, which typically speaking is not very low. They'll usually bottom out at around like 50, 60 mil. If you get springs that are as low as 50, 60 mil lower than factory on a factory damper, you're basically going to be bottoming out, having problems. Whereas coilovers, a lot of them are designed to go a lot lower. So if you're looking to really, slam your car, there are coilover kits specifically designed to go extremely low. I mean, BC Racing's Extreme Low is an example of that, as our Fortune Auto Super Low series. I think Silvers also has a series that goes super low as well. But in any case, most coilover kits will give you anywhere from up to 3 to 5 inches of lowering from factory. And if you get the shock body adjustable ones, which I've talked about the difference between that and the spring perch adjustment in this video here, you can click that. It'll be in the description below as well. They will allow you to do that without sacrificing any suspension travel. So that little diagram I drew here with the damper, you're not going to have that issue with the coilovers with the shock body height adjustment, because they allow the damper to sit in the same place in relation to the spring, except that the whole unit moves up or down depending on your height. So that's the benefit there. Another one is that you get the shock travel. So that's kind of what I just mentioned here. I'm just going to put down the list. You retain the full shock travel even if you lower it, if it has the shock body height adjustment. And even with the ones that don't have shock body height adjustment, but they have spring perch height adjustment, they are designed to go lower than factory anyway. So they're usually going to be lower as it is, and then they'll give you a bit of a range to lower even further. So typically you'll get maybe 40 to 50 mil lower than factory on those kits as well. And so that's the other benefit. You'll still retain more suspension travel than you would with the lowering springs on factory dampers. Now, I talked about the adjustability, so you can adjust them to ride how you like. So the damper adjustment, you can go tighter, softer and harder. I'm not going to add that to the list because I already kind of covered that. The next one is that you can actually change out the springs. So in theory, you could change out the lowering springs too, but you're still going to have this issue with the dampers, whereas on the coilovers, you can typically change out the springs and then revalve or get the dampers revalved to match the spring rate that you want as well. That's a much more complex process with this setup here, whereas the coilovers, most manufacturers will either revalve the dampers or send you dampers that are valved to your new spring rates. So I'm just going to put spring rates. So if you really need to do that, you can. It's a lot easier to do that, and also to buy off the shelf other springs as well to match and upgrade to Swift springs, etc., etc. So you can do that with here as well because they all use universal springs. Now the next one is that a lot of kits are actually rebuildable. So not all of them, but a lot of coilover kits are actually rebuildable. So once you get to the point where you need to service them, you can actually just rebuild the coilover kit. Whereas with these, you just have to replace the dampers. And so rebuilding tends to be a bit cheaper than replacing the entire damper. So that's the benefit of that there. And most coilover kits, I'd say probably most actually, most decent coilover kits will allow you to actually rebuild them, or they'll have a service where they'll rebuild them for you. Now the next one is that some can actually be upgraded. So this is one that you definitely don't see with, cup kits and lowering springs. You can upgrade some coilover kits to a higher level, for example, 2-way or 3-way dampening adjustable. So that allows you, instead of having to buy a whole new kit later on, you can just upgrade your current kit, and that makes things easier and cheaper than having to constantly upgrade your entire suspension setup every time. And the last point I want to make, and I'm actually starting to running out here of space for the pros, because in my opinion, there's so many. I'll just put it here. You can do camber adjustable top mounts as well. So you could potentially make that work, but it's not going to work, and it's going to be much harder to make it work with the lowering springs. And in some cases that won't work. But for McPherson struck cars where you want camber adjustment, a lot of coilovers come with camber adjustable top mounts, and if they don't, they'll be compatible with them as well. So you could get, let's say, a universal kit that matches your car, put it on your coilovers, and you could do that with coilovers. Whereas with the lowering spring and shock kit, because of the upper mount, it may or may not work, and it gets messy. Let's put it that way. So that's the list of pros for the coilovers, and as you can see, in my opinion, it's a lot longer than the pros for the lowering springs. Basically, there isn't really that many. So let's go about cons now. So I've kind of run out of space, but we're not going to need a lot for this. I'm just going to put it here because we've obviously run out of space a bit below. The cons for coilovers, basically the only one that I know of, and this isn't even really true because I addressed it, but people claim that they cost more than lowering springs. And I mean, if you compare to just lowering springs, not the whole cup kit with the dampers, the coilovers will cost you more initially. But in my opinion, like I just addressed earlier, you put lowering springs on factory dampers, which are already worn out and probably halfway through their life, if not pretty much all the way through their life. You're going to have to replace them. And then at that point, you've either had to do the labor twice by the time you've installed the springs, and then you had to take the whole thing out again to put the new dampers in, or you had to pay somebody to do it twice. And even if you didn't, a set of lowering springs and matching dampers that are equivalent to the performance of a coilover kit is going to cost you actually the same amount of money. You're going to be looking at the same amount of money, $1,000 to $1,500, if not $2,000 for some of them, when you just don't get the adjustment. Whereas with the coilovers, you get a lot more. You get the new dampers, you do it all at the beginning, and therefore it's actually works out cheaper in the long run, let's say in the next 12 months even. So I don't even really think that that's a real one, but I wanted to put it there so that I actually address it for the purpose of this video, so that I've addressed that point. So This is my opinion. I honestly don't really see any reason why you would get lowering springs over coilovers unless you're just really tight on money. You want to lower your car now and you plan to upgrade within 6 to 12 months to a proper suspension setup. I can understand that. We've all been there. When I was younger, that was, I've done that as well. So I can get that. But if you're actually looking for a decent suspension setup, I do not see any reason why you would get lowering springs versus coilovers. Now, there's one major thing I want to address here, which is the main point that people are going to make regarding the lowering springs versus the coilovers. I'm just going to make some space here. Okay, and now, so the last point I'm going to make, and I'm just going to put it up here, is ride comfort. This is the big argument people constantly make in favor of lowering springs, but not just lowering springs, it's lowering springs plus shocks. Because this only applies if you buy the full kit. So let's say you buy like a Bilstein kit or something like that that's got the shock and the spring combo. Always the argument is they ride better. I don't agree with that. I've had quite a few sets of both coilovers and lowering spring and shock combos and lowering springs on their own. In my opinion, the only reason that happens is because they're comparing kits that are mainly street oriented here to coilovers that are made for more performance. And so of course, this one is going to be stiffer because it's made more for performance and has stiffer springs in this kit, which is more for the road, but it doesn't perform as well on track. If you were to compare them to a coilover kit that is, let's say, equivalent in terms of ride comfort, I don't think there's going to be any difference. And in fact, this kit's probably going to end up being cheaper. So for example, on this side, if you wanted to get like a comfort-oriented coilover kit, get something like a Tane Flex Z. Tane Flex Z. These are twin tube coilovers with rubber top mounts designed mainly for street use and comfort. And so these, I would be willing to bet that these would ride just as well as any nicely set up lowering spring and shock combo. If you have more money, slightly more money, you want slightly more performance, I would go for the BC Racing BR series. BR, I'm just going to put that. These are mono tube, slightly stiffer than the Tane Flex Zs and slightly more performance oriented, but they are designed for street use. And another really good street use one is the Öhlins Road and Track. Road and Track. Those are designed for both the road use and track use, and they probably will be more on the side of performance, but Öhlins is a really high quality brand who make some really, really good suspension, and they've designed that to be comfortable as well. So in my opinion, if you got some of these kits, especially the Tane Flex Z or the Öhlins Road and Track, and you really wanted comfort, all of these give you adjustable dampening. You can put them on full soft if you want to, and I don't think that's going to ride any worse than a lowering spring and shock combo with the equivalent performance. If you are happy to spend the same amount of money, or the same or more, let's say, on a lowering spring and shock combo, not have the adjustment and not have as good performance because they're not going to perform as well, then you could go with this side and just go pure comfort and just be happy with what you paid for. That's fine. I mean, that is your choice and there's nothing wrong with that. That's all you want. But in my opinion, that equation doesn't make sense. So in my opinion, I would highly recommend rather getting a street designed coilover kit, which is more comfortable, than other coilover kits, I'm saying, and get one of those, and then you at least have the adjustability and the choices to do all the different things. Obviously, this is up to everyone's personal opinion, but this is my personal opinion, and this is what I did eventually. I always ended up going to coilovers in every car I upgraded the suspension to, even if I bought springs and shocks for it previously, because I was never happy with them. So I hope that answers your questions and gives you an idea of what you're looking at when it comes to coilovers versus lowering springs and lowering springs with shock combos as well. This is partly my experience and a lot of my research as well from other people's opinions on this topic too. If you have any questions about any of this, put them in the comments below and I will answer them. Otherwise, if you're looking to buy coilovers for your car, head over to nefariousracing.com. We've got a large range of practically all BC Racing coilover kits. We've got all Fortune Autos as well, and we're going to put up a bunch of new brands as well soon as well on the site. So basically, we have a coilover kit for your car. If you need help selecting one, just shoot us an email through the website and we'll help you select the right coilover kit for your car, your budget, and your circumstances. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Catch you on the next one.